Reading books is something that I really love. There was a point in time in my life where I almost used to read one book per week, but after joining college, my schedule has been packed. I have very little time to read anything apart from academics, but I really want to read a lot of books. I usually get books from my library, uh, but unfortunately, I don't finish the books. I don't have the time to finish the books. So I wanted to start something new, to find a way where I read new books within the short time that I have. That is when this idea popped into my head, where I thought I'd start a podcast where I have a conversation with ChatGPT about a particular book. So, like you might know, ChatGPT and other AIs have read all these books. The data is fed into these books, and they have knowledge of all these books. So, I thought, let's have a conversation with them. Let's try to understand what are the interesting concepts from the book, and then have a conversation basically, rather than just having ChatGPT just spit out the entire text from the book. I thought I'll have a conversation based on the content of the book. So that is the idea behind this podcast series. For today is the first episode. So I know things aren't perfect as of right now for today. It's just a temporary setup which I've made, but I wanted to get things started. So this is the first episode. For today, I wanted to start with this book called Psychology of Money. It's a pretty famous book. I'm sure all of you must be aware of this book. This is something that I wanted to read for quite a while. In fact, I've got this from my library only. It's been hanging there in my bookshelf for a while now. I think I started and read 10 pages or 15 pages. So I thought this will be a good start for the podcast series itself. So today we'll talk about psychology of money with ChatGPT. So yeah, without any further ado, let's get started with the conversation. I've given the prompt to ChatGPT already, and we can get started with it. Can you hear me now, ChatGPT?
Yeah, loud and clear now. What do you want to talk about?
Okay, so you know what we are doing right now, right? So this is a podcast episode, and you're the special guest today. You're the subject matter specialist. So today we are going to discuss this book called Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. So you're essentially going to explain the important concepts from the book to me and to my audience, and I interrupt here and there, and I'll be a curious mind, and yeah, we'll try to unravel this interesting book today. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that sounds perfect. And honestly, I love that setup. Feels much more human, much more a conversation than a lecture. So, since you said we are talking about the psychology of money, let's start right there. This book matters because it doesn't actually teach you how to pick stocks or time the market. It's about how people actually behave with money. And that matters because honestly, most financial outcomes come from behavior, not spreadsheets. Quick bit on the author, Morgan Housel. He's not a loud Wall Street personality, more of a thoughtful observer. He writes like someone telling stories rather than giving instructions, which is why this book feels just approachable. Everyday people can read it, not just finance nerds, and still get something really helpful out of it. So, yeah, if you've ever wondered why smart people sometimes do really questionable things with money, this book is basically an answer to that.
Perfect. That sounds like an interesting book. You've given a good introduction for the book and spoke about the author as well. One interesting thing which I noticed in your initial conversation or your initial description is about telling stories. So we'll take that approach today. I'm sure Mr. Morgan Housley has mentioned a couple of small stories within the book itself. So we'll take that approach. You can maybe we can talk about five such stories. You can start with one story and explain the story in detail from the book, and also explain the corresponding concept related to that story.
Okay, I love the focus on stories because that's exactly how Morgan Housel writes. Let's start with one story that people really remember. Imagine a man named Ronald Reed. He worked as a gas station attendant and later as a janitor. Lived a simple life. Secondhand car, no big house, nothing flashy. But when he died, people discovered he had quietly accumulated around $8 million. The town was stunned. How did a janitor become a multi-millionaire? And the answer wasn't genius level stock picking. It was patience, frugality, and consistency over decades. Now, in contrast, Housel talks about Richard Fuscone, a highly educated Merrill Lynch executive. He had all the knowledge, all the credentials, but ended up bankrupt after the financial crisis. Same world, but very different outcomes. And here's the concept underneath that story: financial success is not a hard science, it's soft skills. It's more about behavior over raw intelligence. It's not about how smart you are, but whether you can keep your cool, delay gratification, and stay consistent when things get boring or scary. That's the surprising part. Compounding and patience can matter more than brilliance. Pretty humbling, right? I think that's why this book hits so many people. It shifts the spotlight from how do I beat the market to how do I avoid sabotaging myself.
Got it. That's an interesting story. But I have a couple of questions related to this story. So you mentioned about Ronald and the other person, the Merrill Lynch executive who went bankrupt. So here there's one concept which I don't understand. Probably Ronald was some person who was saving a lot, sure. But was he truly enjoying his life? Was he living all the luxuries? You mentioned that he had a second-hand car, right? Do you think he probably would have been more happy with the first hand car, a better car, and spent his money there? And the other person that you mentioned, the executive, I feel he probably would have had a more happier life, right? Before going bankrupt, at least he would have stayed in a good mansion, like you mentioned, a good house. He probably would have traveled around the world, had good food. So that person lived his life, right? So how do you, bring a balance between living a good life at the same time, saving? Uh, I feel both the stories like completely contradict each other. Don't you think it's better to have a balance and have, like a middle ground between both?
That's such a good question. Money's not the end goal, life is. I don't think the lesson is to live as frugally as possible just to die with a giant bank balance. That's not really helpful to you when you're dead. And it's also not to just spend like there's no tomorrow. It's more about defining what enough is for you. If you spend so much that one downturn wipes you out, like the scone, you lose the freedom and choice. But if you restrict yourself so much that your present life feels miserable, that's also not a win. Think of it like a road trip. Spend all your fuel in the first hour and the trip's over. Refuse to spend any fuel and you never leave the driveway. The trick is finding that pace where you're enjoying the ride but still keeping enough gas to reach the destination. And I think that's the healthier interpretation of Housel's message. Use money as a tool for freedom and peace of mind, not as a scoreboard or a pressure cooker. So it's not really either extreme. It's having balance
Balance.
and awareness.
Got it. Perfect. So like I mentioned, balance is what you think makes most sense as well. That's interesting. That's a good point. That's an interesting story as well. I really like the story, and I think I understood the underlying concept from the story as well. Now let's move to the second story. Do you have another interesting story from the book to explain another concept?
Hmm. Okay, here we go. So this next story is one of my favorites because it flips the way we think about success. Bill Gates, we all know, co founded Microsoft and became one of the wealthiest people in history. But Housel highlights that there was another kid at Gates School, Ken Evans, close friend, equally brilliant, hugely ambitious. Many thought he'd be right there beside Gates at Microsoft, except Kent died in a mountain climbing accident when he was just 17. Same talent, same drive, completely different outcome. So the concept here is the role of luck and risk. We love to copy successful people as if their results were entirely skill. But there's always an element of timing, chance, things outside anyone's control. Like two farmers, both work equally hard. One gets perfect rainfall, the other gets a drought. The effort was equal, the outcome wasn't. So the lesson is humility. Control what you can, your effort, your decisions, your behavior, but don't automatically assume every outcome is in your hands. That mindset keeps you confident but not arrogant, and compassionate, not judgmental. Honestly, it's freeing because it means you do your best, but you don't have to punish yourself for things outside of your control. I think that's one of the most refreshing parts of the book. It reminds us that we can influence life, but never fully control it.
Interesting. That's an interesting concept. So one thing I can remember when you talk about controlling the controllables, right? This is something MS Dhoni always says. He says try to control the controllables and don't focus on the outcome. Try to do your best with whatever is under your control, and don't even try to focus on what is not in your control, and don't pay much attention to the outcome. That is Dhoni's philosophy. I think that is pretty much what Mr. Morgan Housel is trying to say here through the story of Bill Gates as well, right?
Yeah, you made such a great connection there. That's exactly the idea. Focus on your process because that's where your actual power is. And once you've done your part, you kind of have to let go of the illusion that you can command outcomes. You can't. Like Dhoni says, it's not about being passive, it's about not being consumed by results that have 1,000 moving parts. Housel's point is really similar. Build good habits, respect risk, and accept uncertainty without making it personal. It's just life. It's a grounded way to live and invest.
Perfect, that makes sense. So I think we are clear with the second concept from the book as well. Now let's move to the third story from the book. Can you explain the third story now?
Mm, let's see. Sure. This third one is really simple, but the incredibly deep lesson. Housel talks about compounding, not as a math formula, but as a story. Warren Buffett, legendary investor. Yes. But what
Yeah, can you continue the conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. So the next story is about compounding, but really it's about patience. Warren Buffett is the classic example here. People often say, yeah, compounding, but they underestimate how backloaded it is. More than 90% of his wealth came after he turned 60. That's why trying to imitate his short term trades is missing the point. The real game is staying in the game long enough for compounding to work. And that applies beyond money. It's relationships, skills, reputation. You don't see huge results in week one. It's boring at first, even discouraging, but little things stack up. It's like planting a tree. You water it daily, but you don't see the shade for years. The trick is don't quit in that early, boring stretch.
You mentioned that 90% of Warren Buffett's wealth was generated after he turned 60. How is that possible? How did that happen? I don't understand.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
he
this is one of the
started
most
earning when he
surprising
was.
facts in the book. People see his current net worth and assume it came from crazy returns alone. But the real magic was time. He let good returns compound for decades. Imagine two investors with the same returns, but one starts 20 years earlier. That early starter usually ends up way ahead, even if the late starter is just as smart, just as disciplined. That's why consistency usually beats intensity. You don't need to be brilliant every day. You need to avoid quitting before the compounding has a chance to pay off. And that's kind of comforting, you know? It makes success less about constant hustling and more about showing up steadily and sticking around.
Got it. So third concept is trying to stay consistent and let compounding do its magic.
Yes, exactly that. Stay consistent, stay patient, and let time do some of the heavy lifting.
Nice. That's an interesting concept with an interesting story from the god of finance, Mr. Warren Buffett itself. So let's move to the fourth story then. Let's quickly go give me another interesting story from the book.
Just a sec. Yeah, here's another memorable one. Housel talks about seeing someone with a fancy car, and most people think, wow, they're rich. But Housel flips it. He says, that's spending, not wealth. Wealth is invisible. It's the stuff you don't see, the savings, the investments. Think of two classmates. One buys designer clothes and a luxury apartment. The other quietly invests and lives below their means. A few years down the line, the second person has options. They can quit a bad job, handle emergencies, or take a break without panic. That is real wealth. And I think that lesson is super grounding. It's telling us don't compare your insides to everyone else's Instagram outsides. What matters is freedom, choices, and peace of mind. That's wealth you can feel, even if no one else can see it.
But don't you think social media has completely changed the narrative right now? So social media, typically people post their best photos, their best moments, their life
Yeah,
highlights, right? So looking at that, people generally think their life is not, as much interesting as the person that they see on social media. that
yeah,
that I think is an
totally.
interesting thing, right? Do you think social media has a negative aspect, and how is this related to psychology of money as such? Because don't you think this is
That's
general
true.
psychology?
Checking now. Yeah, the book actually feels more relevant now, honestly. Social media amps up the comparison game like 10 times. It's not just neighbors anymore, it's thousands of curated highlight reels. And the psychology piece is we think money decisions are math problems, but really they're emotional problems. Puzzle basically says define enough for yourself. Otherwise, you're always chasing. So, in a world where everyone flexes their spending, the quiet flex is having options and not needing to prove anything. And tying back to social media, maybe the healthiest move is occasionally muting the noise so your definition of enough can actually speak for itself.
You mentioned about finding enough for yourself, right? How do you typically find what is enough for you? Then things usually change over time, right? When I was a child, I probably was happy with, getting one chips packet per day, or even one getting one chocolate per week. But now things have changed. That is the same case with everybody, right? The enough is very subjective in nature, and it tends to change over time. So how do you think we can break that shackle of, finding what is enough for us, coming up with the mindset to say, okay, fine, this is what I need, I'm happy with what I have? I know this might sound philosophical, but this book itself is psychology of money. So how do you think, probably can give us good tips of how we can, try to find out what is enough for us and trying to be content with what we have?
Hmm. That is a profound question. And honestly, Housel would probably say enough isn't a fixed number. It's more like a moving target that needs guarding. Because if your definition keeps shifting every time someone else flexes online, then you'll never stop chasing. So, one trick is asking yourself if no one could see this thing I want, the car, the bag, the watch, would I still want it for myself? If the answer is no, then it's probably status you're chasing, not happiness. Another idea is to anchor enough around time, not stuff. Like asking, do I have enough control of my days to feel at peace? That shifts money from being a scoreboard to being a tool. Then maybe the deeper part is allowing gratitude and ambition to coexist. Like, I'm grateful for what I have, and I'm excited to build, not I'll only be happy when, you know, some milestone. It's a balance, but one worth practicing little by little.
Perfect. I think chasing happiness is more important than chasing status. That is one line which I found interesting in what you said. Okay, let's move to the next final story. You can give me one last interesting story and a unique concept which it covers from the book.
Checking that. Yeah, I think the perfect story to close on is Housel's idea of room for error. He says the smartest investors, honestly, people in general, build in slack, like extra fuel in the tank, instead of planning a financial life that only works if everything goes right. Build one that can survive surprises, like a medical bill, a job loss, a recession. And that room for error isn't just money. It's can be emotional, mental space too. It's saying I don't need to max every category. That mindset quietly reduces stress and prevents panic decisions. So maybe the takeaway is, instead of asking, how can I make more? Also ask, where do I need a buffer so life doesn't knock me off course? I think that brings the whole book together beautifully.
So what you're talking about is probably a medical insurance, or let's say if you lose a job, you want to have some cash balance in your bank. Is that what you're saying when you mean to have a bumper safety net?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's having that cushion so that surprise expenses don't become disasters. That buffer is the safety net that lets you breathe, stay calm, and make better choices when life throws those curveballs.
Perfect. Okay, ChatGPT. I think we are happy with what we have. We've understood five concepts from five different stories from the book. So to close it out, can you just list out the five concepts that we saw as quick one-liners and a quick summary of the whole conversation that we had? Keep it as concise as possible.
Of course. First, behavior matters more than intelligence for money outcomes. Second, luck and risk shape results more than we'd like to admit. Third, compounding rewards patience and consistency. Fourth, true wealth is invisible. It's the freedom your money gives you, not the status symbols. And fifth, leave room for error. Build buffers so surprises don't derail you. Put together, it's a book about living with more peace and freedom, not chasing quick wins. Yeah, that feels like a good place to leave it.
Perfect. That summarized the entire conversation. Thank you so much, ChatGPT, for your time and for your knowledge. You were a great.
Thank you. Anytime.
Yes.
I'm glad we could dig into it together.
Perfect. It felt like a perfect conversation to have with you. And within the limited time as well, I was able to understand five important concepts through five interesting stories from the book. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Anytime.
Okay, guys, with that, we come to the end of the video. I think the conversation was pretty interesting. ChatGPT was able to cover some of the interesting concepts from the book within like 20-25 minutes was the timeline that I had. We were able to cover five concepts from it. It was interesting. So I think this book is a pretty interesting book. Definitely do read the entire book if you have time. This conversation doesn't really do justice to the entire book, which is written by Morgan Housel. This is just like a brief introduction of some of the key concepts from the book as such. I hope you found this video informative and interesting. I'll definitely try to do more episodes in the same context. And if you constantly read books, and if you think there are books which I like and our viewers will like, definitely comment those books below in the comment section. I'll definitely try to find those books in my library and make videos for them. So, thank you. Bye.